You've been lied to your entire life. Society has programmed you to believe that playing fair, being nice, and following the rules is the path to success. But here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to tell you. While you're playing by the rules, everyone else is playing to win. Niccolò Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago when he wrote The Prince, and his insights are more relevant today than ever before. The world isn't fair, and the sooner you accept this reality, the sooner you can start leveraging the competitive advantages that others are too afraid or too naive to use. Think about it for a moment. Every single day, you witness people who seem less qualified, less talented, and less deserving than you climbing higher up the ladder of success. They get the promotions, they win the contracts, they attract the partners, they build the businesses that you dreamed of building, and you sit there wondering what you're doing wrong, convinced that if you just work a little harder, if you just be a little nicer, if you just follow the rules a little more perfectly, your turn will come. But your turn never comes, does it? That's because you're playing a completely different game than everyone else. Machiavelli observed that there are two ways to fight, with laws and with force. He said that the first way is natural to humans, but it's often not enough. The second way belongs to beasts, but sometimes humans must use it too. What he meant by this isn't literal violence, but rather the understanding that pure morality and rule following aren't always sufficient tools for achieving your goals in a competitive world. While you're constraining yourself within the boundaries of what's nice and fair, your competitors are using every psychological, strategic, and tactical advantage available to them. Let's talk about the nice guy paradox that's probably destroying your potential right now. You've been conditioned to believe that being agreeable, accommodating, and selfless will eventually be rewarded. You say yes when you want to say no. You give credit to others when you deserve recognition. You avoid conflict even when standing up for yourself is necessary. You prioritize other people's comfort over your own success. And what has this gotten you? Frustration, resentment, and a nagging feeling that life is passing you by, while others who seem less considerate than you are thriving. Machiavelli understood that effective leaders and successful people must master the art of strategic flexibility. He famously wrote that a prince must learn to be both a fox and a lion. The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. Therefore, one must be both, cunning like a fox to recognize traps, and strong like a lion to frighten wolves. In practical terms, this means you need to develop the intelligence to navigate complex social and professional situations, while also having the courage and strength to stand your ground when necessary. Consider how this applies to your career. When you're in a meeting and someone takes credit for your idea, what do? If you're like most people who've been conditioned to play fair, you probably stay silent, telling yourself that your contribution will be recognized eventually. But Machiavelli would tell you that this is naive thinking. The person who spoke up and claimed credit understood something you didn't. Perception often matters more than reality. While you were being polite and modest, they were being strategic. They recognized that in a competitive environment, waiting for others to give you credit is often waiting forever. The same principle applies to negotiations, whether you're discussing salary, closing business deals, or even navigating personal relationships. Fair-minded people often enter negotiations with the assumption that everyone wants a mutually beneficial outcome. They present their case rationally, expecting others to respond with equal reasonableness. But Machiavelli would warn you that this approach is often ineffective because it ignores the psychological dynamics of power and persuasion. Successful negotiators understand that people are motivated by self-interest, emotions, and perception just as much as logic. Here's where most people get uncomfortable, and here's where Machiavelli's insights become truly valuable. He didn't advocate for being evil or harmful to others. Instead, he advocated for being realistic about human nature and strategic about achieving your goals. There's a massive difference between being malicious and being effectively self-interested. Malicious people seek to harm others for the sake of causing harm. Strategic people understand that sometimes achieving your legitimate goals requires actions that go beyond simple niceness and rule following. Let's examine the concept of strategic deception, which is probably the most misunderstood aspect of Machiavellian thinking. When most people hear about deception, they immediately think of lying and manipulation. But strategic deception is much more nuanced than that. It's about controlling information, managing perceptions, and timing your revelations for maximum impact. It's about understanding that complete transparency isn't always in your best interest or even in the best interest of others. For example, if you're job hunting while currently employed, you're engaging in strategic deception by not immediately informing your current employer about your search. If you're building a business and keeping your strategies confidential from competitors, you're using strategic deception. If you're choosing not to reveal your weaknesses or uncertainties during important presentations or negotiations, you're applying Machiavellian principles. None of these examples involve harming others or being dishonest about facts, but they all involve being strategic about what information you share and when you share it. Machiavelli also understood the importance of reputation and fear in achieving objectives. He observed that it's better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. This doesn't mean you should try to make people afraid of you in a threatening or abusive way. Rather, it means that respect often comes from others understanding that you have boundaries, standards, and consequences. When people know that you won't accept being taken advantage of, they're more likely to treat you with respect. When they understand that working with you brings benefits but working against you brings costs, they're more likely to align with your interests. Think about the most successful people in your field or industry. Do they achieve their success primarily through being nice and following all the unwritten social rules? Or do they succeed because they're strategic, decisive, and willing to make moves that others find uncomfortable? They network aggressively, they negotiate harder, they take credit for their contributions, they set clear boundaries, and they don't apologize for pursuing their goals with intensity and focus. The fear of being perceived as selfish or aggressive often prevents people from employing these strategies. But here's what Machiavelli understood. In competitive environments, excessive concern about others' opinions is often a luxury you can't afford. While you're worried about whether your colleagues will think you're too ambitious, your competitors are focused on winning. While you're concerned about being perceived as pushy, others are actively pursuing the opportunities you're hesitating to claim. Another crucial Machiavellian insight is the importance of adaptability and situational awareness. He wrote extensively about how circumstances change and how effective people must change their approaches accordingly. Many people develop one way of operating and stick with it regardless of the situation. They're always collaborative, always direct, always accommodating, or always aggressive. But Machiavelli would argue that this inflexibility is a significant disadvantage. Different situations require different approaches. Sometimes collaboration is the most effective strategy, and sometimes competition is necessary. Sometimes transparency serves your interests, and sometimes discretion is more valuable. Sometimes being accommodating builds important relationships, and sometimes setting firm boundaries is essential. The key is developing the judgment to recognize what each situation requires and the skill to adjust your approach accordingly. Let's talk about the concept of strategic alliances, which Machiavelli understood was crucial for achieving significant goals. Most people approach relationships in a purely social or emotional way, focusing on whether they like someone or whether someone likes them. But strategic thinking involves also considering how relationships can be mutually beneficial in practical ways. This doesn't mean using people or being fake in your interactions. Instead, it means being intentional about building relationships that can create value for everyone involved. When you're building your career, starting a business, or working on important projects, consider who has the resources, connections, expertise, or influence that could help you succeed. What value can you provide to these people in return? How can you create situations where helping you also serves their interests? This type of thinking allows you to build powerful networks and partnerships that can accelerate your progress significantly. Machiavelli also emphasized the importance of timing, which is often overlooked by people who focus solely on working hard and being competent. You can have the best ideas, the strongest work ethic, and the most noble intentions, but if your timing is poor, your efforts may be wasted. Strategic people pay attention to trends, cycles, and windows of opportunity. They understand when to act quickly and when to wait. They recognize when circumstances are favorable for their goals and when patience is the better strategy. Consider how this applies to career advancement. Simply doing good work and expecting to be promoted isn't a strategy, it's hope. Strategic career advancement involves understanding the political dynamics of your organization, recognizing when opportunities are emerging, positioning yourself to be considered for key roles, and timing your moves to coincide with favorable circumstances. This might mean volunteering for high-visibility projects when leadership changes are happening, or it might mean making strategic job changes when your industry is experiencing growth. The same principles apply to entrepreneurship. Many people start businesses based purely on their passions or interests without considering market timing, competitive dynamics, or their strategic advantages. Machiavellian thinking would suggest analyzing when market conditions are favorable, what unique positioning you can establish, and how you can leverage your strengths while minimizing your vulnerabilities. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, the moral concerns that many people have about applying these concepts. Machiavelli has been mischaracterized for centuries as an advocate for evil or immoral behavior, but a careful reading of his work reveals that he was actually a realist who observed how power and success actually work, rather than how we wish they worked. He wasn't encouraging people to be cruel or dishonest for the sake of cruelty or dishonesty. Instead, he was pointing out that in competitive situations, purely idealistic approaches often fail, and failure can have serious consequences not just for you, but for the people who depend on you. The key insight is that being strategic and self-interested doesn't require being harmful to others. In fact, the most successful applications of Machiavellian principles often involve creating situations where your success also benefits others. When you negotiate effectively, both parties can get better outcomes than they would have achieved otherwise. When you build your career strategically, you become more valuable to your organization and your colleagues. When you start a successful business, you create value for customers and opportunities for employees. The real moral problem isn't with being strategic and competitive. It's with being ineffective and failing to achieve goals that matter to you and the people you care about. If you have a family depending on your income, is it moral to handicap your earning potential by refusing to negotiate assertively or pursue opportunities aggressively? If you have ideas or innovations that could benefit many people, is it moral to let them go unrealized because you're uncomfortable with self-promotion or competition? Machiavelli would argue that you have a responsibility to be effective, not just well-intentioned. Good intentions without effective action often produce disappointing results. Strategic action, even when it feels uncomfortable or goes against social conditioning, often produces outcomes that benefit everyone involved. Let's get practical about how to apply these insights in your daily life. Start by examining situations where you regularly put others' interests ahead of your own in ways that do not actually serve anyone well. Are you saying yes to commitments that drain your time and energy without providing significant value to others? Are you avoiding necessary conversations because they might be uncomfortable? Are you failing to advocate for your own interests in situations where doing so wouldn't harm anyone else? Begin practicing strategic communication. This doesn't mean being dishonest or manipulative. Instead, it means being more intentional about how you present information, when you share certain details, and how you frame your contributions and achievements. If you've completed an important project, don't just hope that others will notice. Find appropriate ways to ensure that your work is visible to the people who matter. If you have ideas or expertise that could be valuable, don't wait for others to ask for your input. Find strategic ways to contribute to important conversations. Develop your negotiation skills and start applying them more frequently. Many people only think about negotiation in major situations like salary discussions or big purchases. But negotiation happens constantly in daily life, from deciding where to go to dinner with friends to determining project responsibilities at work. Practice presenting your preferences clearly, finding mutually beneficial solutions, and being willing to walk away when agreements don't serve your interests. Pay more attention to the political and social dynamics in your environment. Who has influence and decision-making power? What are their priorities and concerns? How can you position yourself and your contributions in ways that align with their objectives. This isn't about being fake or manipulative. It's about being strategic and realistic about how organizations and relationships actually function. Start building strategic relationships more intentionally. Identify people who have expertise, connections, or resources that could be valuable to your goals. Consider what value you can provide to them in return. Look for opportunities to create mutually beneficial partnerships and alliances. Remember that the most powerful networks are built on genuine value exchange, not just social pleasantries. Become more comfortable with self-advocacy. This is often the biggest challenge for people who have been conditioned to be modest and self-effacing. Practice talking about your accomplishments, your goals, and your value in clear, confident terms. Learn to interrupt politely when necessary, to redirect conversations toward your contributions, and to ask directly for what you want. Develop strategic patience and timing awareness. Not every opportunity should be pursued immediately, and not every battle should be fought as soon as it arises. Learn to recognize when circumstances are favorable for your goals and when it's better to wait. Understand that sometimes letting others make mistakes or reveal their weaknesses is more effective than trying to compete with them directly. Most importantly, start viewing competition as natural and healthy rather than as something to be avoided. Competition drives innovation, excellence, and progress. When you compete effectively, you push yourself to become better, and you push others to improve as well. The goal isn't to destroy your competitors, but to outperform them through superior strategy, execution, and value creation. Here's what I want you to understand. Implementing these strategies doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't mean abandoning your values or becoming a different person. Machiavellian thinking is about adding strategic awareness and competitive effectiveness to whatever positive qualities you already possess. You can still be kind, generous, and ethical while also being strategic, assertive, and competitive. The world rewards results, not just good intentions. The people who achieve significant success in business, politics, relationships, and life generally understand this principle and act accordingly. They've learned to balance idealism with realism, kindness with strength, and cooperation with competition. They've developed the flexibility to adapt their approach based on circumstances while staying true to their core objectives. Stop waiting for fairness to appear in an unfair world. Stop expecting others to reward your niceness while they're focused on winning. Stop handicapping yourself with strategies that feel morally comfortable but practically ineffective. The game is being played whether you choose to play strategically or not. Your competitors are using every advantage available to them. Your only choice is whether to do the same or to continue wondering why your noble intentions aren't producing the results you want. Machiavelli's insights have remained relevant for 5 centuries because they're based on accurate observations about human nature and competitive dynamics. People are motivated by self-interest. Power matters. Perception shapes reality. Strategic thinking produces better results than purely idealistic thinking. These aren't cynical observations. They are realistic ones that can help you navigate the world more effectively while still maintaining your integrity and values. The competitive advantages we've discussed today aren't secrets because they're hidden. They're secrets because most people are uncomfortable implementing them. While your competitors are networking strategically, negotiating aggressively, and positioning themselves advantageously, you have the opportunity to do the same. While others are taking credit for their contributions and advocating for their interests, you can learn to do likewise. While they're building alliances and timing their moves for maximum impact, you can develop these same capabilities. If you found value in today's insights about competitive strategy and Machiavellian principles, I want to hear from you in the comments section. Tell me about a situation where you realized that being too nice or too fair actually worked against your interests. Share your experiences with learning to be more strategic in your approach to career, business, or relationships. Have you ever noticed that the people who seem to get ahead are not necessarily the nicest or most rule-abiding? Comment below and let me know if these patterns show up in your life too. Your stories and insights help create a community of people who understand that success requires more than good intentions. And if this video helped shift your perspective on competition and strategic thinking, Hit that like button to help spread these ideas to more people who could benefit from them. Too many talented, well-intentioned people are stuck in patterns that prevent them from achieving their potential because they've been taught that strategic thinking is somehow wrong or selfish. By sharing this content, you're helping others discover that they can be both ethical and effective, both kind and competitive. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos where we'll continue exploring the psychology of success, the dynamics of power and influence, and the strategic principles that can help you achieve your most important goals. We're building a community of people who understand that the world rewards results, not just good intentions, and who are willing to develop the skills and strategies necessary to succeed in competitive environments. Remember, the choice is yours. You can continue playing by rules that others ignore, hoping that fairness will eventually prevail. Or you can start implementing the strategic principles that successful people have understood for centuries. The game is already being played. The only question is whether you will play to win or continue wondering why others keep winning while you are still waiting for your turn. Stop playing fair in an unfair world and start leveraging the competitive advantages that can finally help you achieve the success you deserve.